I've taught jazz guitar professionally for years, in higher education, in person, and online. Over and over again, I see the same three issues, holding students back from sounding like the pros. These aren't just technical problems, they're mindset traps. Today, I'll break those down for you and give you actionable fixes and share how overcoming these transformed not only my playing, but my students as well. Let's dive into it. So the first mistake is trying to create jazz language from scratch. Students often avoid using the master's vocabulary, thinking it's inauthentic to use someone else's language instead of their own. But that's the thing, is jazz is a language. For example, you wouldn't learn French without studying French speakers and copying what it feels like and sounds like to speak French. So for example, listen to this line. Technically correct, but is kind of lifeless and doesn't really sound like jazz. Now, here's a line over that exact same progression, but this time I'm going to be using language from Grant Green's solo on Cool Blues. Night and day, right? So here's the truth. All the greats were clones of their heroes at first. Wes Montgomery copied Charlie Christian note for note, which led to him getting his first gig. Grant Green copied Charlie Parker. Kenny Burrell copied T-Bone Walker. And Pat Metheny stole from Wes. By internalizing their heroes' phrasing, they were able to unlock their own voices because they now understood why things sounded the way that they did through their imitation and study of the masters before them. So, what can you do? Well, first start by transcribing an entire solo. Don't just learn the licks from that solo, but absorb the rhythms, the dynamics, and the feel. For example, a good solo to start with would be Grant Green's solo on Cool Blues, like I was demonstrating from the previous example. After learning to play it, find and steal your favorite lines from that solo. Those lines, the ones that you were drawn to, are the start of you developing your own voice. If you want my step-by-step method for how to practice using language in your solos, make sure to check out my Patreon masterclass, which you can find linked below. So the second issue is not knowing the fretboard deeply enough. When I played that line, I wasn't just thinking C Dorian. I was seeing shapes and pathways on the guitar neck that allowed me to connect my ideas together. Many students practice scales and arpeggios in the same place, starting on the same root every time. That's just muscle memory, not real fretboard knowledge. So what can you do? Well, start by practicing scales and arpeggios in unfamiliar positions. For example, instead of just playing a C major 7 arpeggio, where everyone normally plays it, play it down on the neck lower in a different spot, starting on a different note. Or be able to vertically move it across the neck. Or play it in one position and start on a different note of the arpeggio each time. Force your brain to see the neck as one connected canvas. If you're interested in more guidance on that, I've got a free video guide on how to practice arpeggios, which you can find linked in the corner of this screen. Also keep in mind that the same would go for scales. Don't just practice your C major scale, for example, starting in one position and think that you have it. You should be able to, just like I demonstrated with the arpeggios, be able to play it across the neck and move it around. So the third mistake that's holding students back from sounding like pros is not truly learning the tunes that they're playing over. For example, if you're reading a chord chart that has the changes on it, you're not really improvising, you're just reacting to the sheet music. For example, students will often work hard on learning language and practicing their arpeggios and scales and such, but have trouble piecing it together in real time when they're playing over a song that they're working on. Often the first step to solving this issue is by removing what your brain has to think about. Once you really have a tune memorized, being learning it from a recording, then it is much easier to improvise over it as you're not thinking about what the next chord is. You just know it because you know the tune. So what can you do about this? Well, some great tips for learning tunes by ear that I've picked up over the years are 1. Being able to hear the chord progressions rather than just the chord. So when you're learning it, don't try to hear each chord altogether. Instead, hear a chord going to the next chord and hear them in chunks. So recognize that that's a 2-5-1. Or say 3-6-2-5-1. The second one is learning a melody from the vocal recording first if it's a songbook tune, or go to the original recording if it's an instrumental-based tune and learn the melody from there. By knowing the melody, you'll always know where you are in the tune. And in order to really learn the melody, you have to learn it from a vocalist that's most likely singing it from the sheet music. Third one is to use digital applications to help you. So for example, the app Moises lets you separate all the instruments of the tune, so that means that you could separate the bass from the song and be able to turn it up so you can hear it better and hear what the changes are. Or another great one would be using the software called Transcribe, which lets you loop certain sections of the tune so you can kind of work section to section as you're learning the tunes by ear. Number 4 is to pitch up the song by an octave, so that way, as guitar players, we can hear the bass much easier. This works because when we play low notes on the guitar, we're used to hearing it in that octave, but bass players play an octave below that. So if we pitch up the song an octave, it might sound like Chickmunks, but now we'll be able to hear the bass in a register that we're used to hearing. All right, so you know the 3 things that really hold students back. So I'm going to give you a couple goals to work on. The first one is transcribe 4 bars of Grant Green's Cool Blues solo this week. The second one is to pick one of the 5 tunes that's listed on the screen and try to learn as much as you can by ear this week using some of the tips I told you about. 3 would be to commit to working on the fretboard a little bit each day by either using my arpeggio and scale method or by finding a method that works for you and working through the fretboard a little bit at a time. Remember that improvisation isn't about perfection, it's about storytelling. But you need tools to tell that story. Commit to these fixes to sound like a pro. Transcribe the masters, master the fretboard, and internalize tunes. If you're interested, you can find all the materials that I was referencing in this lesson in the video description below. Also, if you're serious about improving your guitar playing, then I would listen closely. Have you ever listened to jazz guitar legends like Wes Montgomery or Joe Pass and thought, how do they sound so good? My name's Nathan Borton, and I've spent years breaking down the language of jazz guitar greats. Over on my Patreon, I've built something unique, a complete and evolving database that will give you everything you need to sound like the jazz guitar legends. You'll get exclusive access to hundreds of videos that break down specific elements of all the jazz legends, in-depth masterclasses, chord melody arrangements, practice-ready etudes that turn theory into muscle memory, as well as guitar profiles synced to every single piece of content. But don't just take my word for it. Look at all the satisfied customers that are currently using Patreon and getting the most out of this exclusive and great service. Join hundreds of guitarists unlocking their potential right now. And on the note of Patreons, I want to say thank you to all those Patreons that support me. Without you guys, none of this would be possible, and I truly appreciate your support. Well, thank you so much for watching, and remember to always keep swinging.